Hey all. So I am in Isaiah, and the first about 40 parts of it, right, we're really seeing the desolation of cities. And I can't help but sort of think about the world today and where we're at. But every now and then, as I look at those stories in Isaiah, I see like a glimmer, an offshoot of Jesse, right? The cornerstone, Argro Cornovius Lithos. Right, all of a sudden little lamps are mentioned, and I see these sparkles, things that catch my eye. And what it reminds me of is a great teacher that I have that teaches me stories. And let me tell you one of them that is just kind of keeps coming to me as I read Isaiah. So the certain king wanted to have a wedding. And he got everything ready for his son, right? He got all the party, got all the invites out, and then he sent his servants out to go get all of his friends. And you know, the friends of the king all want to come to the wedding, right? So the servants go and they tell all these folks about this wedding and how great it is for the king. But the people that are going to come to the wedding, all of the friends of the king, all of the expected attendees, they have other priorities. One of them goes to his job, one of them goes to the family, but they don't go to the wedding. And even more so, they kill the servants, right? They persecute these people who have come to them to tell them about this great wedding, this feast that the king is throwing that they can attend. So ultimately, the king hears that, and what my teacher tells me is he then goes back. He sends out people to kill those folks, right? And he says, well, I still have this wedding, right? There's still this sort of gorgeous kingdom of marriage that we can have for folks. So he sends other servants out and he says, go on the highways, find guests, make them good, make them bad, just bring them. Tell them that there's a great feast, there's a wedding. We want them to come and enjoy this abundance. So that's what the servants do, right? They go out and no longer do they look for the criteria of who is worthy, right? Instead, what they look for is folks who are willing to get dressed up and show up at the wedding and really enjoy and support that marriage, that relationship. We are looking for folks to show up and support the relationship. And ultimately, the king sees that, and then he notices one guy who's there who wants to eat the food, wants to have the party, right? But what he's not doing is he's not dressed for the wedding, right? He's not showing a commitment. There's a falsehood to what he's done there. So what the king does is he tosses him out. And he doesn't just put him to death, right? It's worse than that. There's gnashing of teeth in the dark, meaning that continually you don't know where it's coming from, but he's going to be nipped at. And the rest of the guests are going to enjoy the wedding. So my teacher told us a story telling us about really not focusing on the legalistic criteria that can be invited to the wedding, because those folks have other priorities. Instead, we seek those who are willing to come and support the relationship and show up, regardless of where they're at in life or where they may be. And my teacher told other great lessons that I'm reminded of from Isaiah. Right, so all of a sudden I'm reminded of another lesson where some government officials came to my teacher and said, gosh, what about taxes and money, right? We think about that a lot. And what my teacher said is give me some of this money. And the money they gave to him had Caesar's image on it. And he says, render to Caesar what is to Caesar, right? And what I say to you is, here's the shocker. My teacher is Jesus Christ in this story. And I say that aside from rendering to Caesar what is to Caesar, render to Christ what is to Christ. Because in this modern day age, we all wear a symbol of Christ when we are believers and followers of Christ, because we are his, right? Thou shalt put no other God before me. In fact, these same government folks are going to come and ask Jesus about commandments, right? And what's the most important? And he's going to say to love thy God with all thy heart, with all thy soul, and with all thy mind, right? Saying that we were born under the sign of the cross, no other sign. And we wear Jesus' symbol because we are rendered to him. We belong to him just as Caesar's money belonged to Caesar. But Jesus had other questions that were posed to him along this line, right? About resurrection, right? Particularly from folks who don't believe in resurrection and what it is in relationships and in marriage, right? What happens in heaven. And Jesus just puts them down and says, hey, what happens in heaven isn't like what happens on earth. The relationships and the marriage and the partnerships, you're as angels serving God. And then the last question that Jesus gets asked in this whole series that sort of I keep thinking of as I'm in Isaiah, right, is going to be about David. and about the lineage. And what I'm just going to say on this is just my own take on it. David did the best he could. You know, David was like the older son going out trying to figure it out, and then God had a different plan for Jesus and the way he ruled. If David were to see the way that Jesus ruled, he would tell you follow Jesus, because Jesus rules the way that God would rule on earth in human form. And David did the best that he could with what he knew, but what Jesus knew came straight from God, and David would humbly submit to that as well. And that's where Jesus shuts him up at the end, right? And so I think about all this because all of a sudden, as I'm in Isaiah and I'm reading about the fall of the Philistines and what will happen with Egypt and of God's judgment and praising God, I see these glimmers of light. And every time I see them and I see a mention, right, I start to think of Jesus. I think of his teachings. And I know that as we start to go along in Isaiah, that light will start to shine brighter and greater, because that is the second half of Isaiah, which I head to this week, which is all about the coming of Jesus. So little sparkles of light in our life turn into the blinding glory of God. And the Holy Spirit teaches us that Jesus Christ is the source for that light. Happy Sunday, chatting at Cheesman. Oh, by the way, Matthew 22. That was on Matthew 22. Have a good one.